Today's podcast is brought to you by the Running Fridge, a drink in your hand anytime you need it, anywhere. With its two mechanical legs powered by cold fusion, nothing's stopping this mechanical fridge from getting you the drink you need when you need it most. Never miss that moment in life trying to get a drink, and order yourself one today. At one point in our lives, we assume that every person is a kind and gentle soul, unwilling to harm another being. We think they are nice, kind, forgiving, and gentle people, ignoring all their flaws through childhood innocence. Yet, as time progresses and we gain more age, people slowly start to realize the cruelty of the world we live in and the traits that make up its inhabitants. We begin to realize that people are capable and more than willing to commit violence, manipulation, or theft in order to satisfy their own selfish goals and desires. Tonight, however, I wish to dive into more detail about what leads to these outcomes, as well as analyze how these traits apply to not just to good narratives, but to the reality that we live in. Like trees, we all have roots. And by realizing what these roots are and how they impact our lives, can we truly understand the prospect of our future and the reality of the present. Ideals. Ideals are what the driving force of the story is. They are what clash, argue, and conflict with one another to create situations within the book. Yet, a similar line of thinking can be applied to our world as well. Conflict stems from individuality. As such, there are countless battles of ideology and belief within one's own life. Take a moment right now and peer into the day so far, maybe even the previous day. How many times can you recall where there was a conflict of interest, a clash of ideologies? I myself can count at least 10 or so before we start going to the nitty-gritty stuff, the minor stuff. Yet, 10 is still a fair number to prove a point, as humans naturally conflict with one another because they are all independent and therefore have different morals and beliefs, similar to how one is either a conservative or a liberal, political speaking. Now, if we take these concepts of conflicting ideals and apply them to the book at hand, one can start to create connections between those within and those withdrawn from the text. For those still wondering what text I'm referring to, it's called A Mercy Among the Children, a tale of what it means to believe in an ideal and what it means to be human. A quick summary for those who haven't read, the story is about a man named Sidney and his unmovable belief in doing no harm or even raising their voice against another human being, as mentioned on page 33. This, while a noble belief on his part, has led him and his family to nothing but trouble as those around him abuse his goodwill for their own exploitations. They frame him for stealing, both items and money, and assaulting his wife, not to mention the destruction of a bridge and even the death of a young boy. All because he was considered a weird man who reads weird books, as mentioned on page 150. Yet, regardless of any and all accusations, he never once took a stand against it or sought revenge, as he believed that revenge, in his feudal brilliance, was anthem to justice. However, no good will last on those surrounded by evil, and his family suffered the consequences of ideals nonetheless. This is where we're introduced to the secondary character of the book, Sidney's son Lyle, when he begins to stray from the path of his father and transforms into what society requires of a person in order to succeed, this being a ruthless and moralist person. He steals, he fights, and he misuses his strength and power against those who are both deserving and not, really. Regardless, however, it still goes against his roots, his father's ideals, ultimately leading to him living an unfulfilling life where he is stuck in a stagnation of anger, grief, and revenge. While a simple story on the surface level, the story's true weight is its relatability, both in terms of characters and motives. While it's difficult to believe that you are a likely hero within the story, slaying dragons and whatnot and rescuing the princess, Mercy Among the Children takes no fictional excuses in this matter. Each character, ranging from the little ray of sunshine that's autumn to that of the antagonist Matthew Pitts, is all somewhat relatable to our everyday life. We see millions of people who are mistreated by others for pleasure, while we see an equal amount of those who are filled with despair by seeing these people, filled with misery, guilt, and sadness. This relatability is due to one factor, a singular factor, that defines relatability between texts. This is one's upbringing. While I did mention that it's difficult to relate to those from true fantasy stories, they still can be relatable by how they depict the evolution and growth of the character. Many stories include neglectful parents or a lack of something that changes the hero's perspective and viewpoint in the world, similar to if they have a surplus of something. Yet, While stories in nature, many can relate to the similar circumstances and infinities, as well as surplus of the aforementioned, changing their lives based on their privilege or negligence, respectively. Let's view the roots of both Weil and Autumn, brother and sister, yet in complete contrast to one another. Weil, on one hand, begins his descent through a noble action, as he tried to protect his sister from being toyed with by a larger boy within the school. Ideologies clash, and the two youngsters begin to have a brawl. I'm no boxing expert here, but with the first few minutes of combat, Weil was getting pummeled. Blow after blow rang against his body, yet he stood there and took it, following along his father's indoctrinated beliefs and refusing to fight back. This all changed once Weil was slammed to the ground, crushing both his body and his moral contractions. He snapped, to put it lightly, and while refraining from full brutality against his assaulter, caught his blow and made a show of it to demonstrate the difference between the two's strength in Weil's favor. Afterwards, he began to embrace the comfort and safety of power, regularly wearing knives and mindlessly assaulting and stealing from others without a moral conscience, justifying it by saying it's for the family, I have to do it. Yet, even he sees his fall, as his subconscious nags his conscious self about both his deeds and what he has abandoned in the name of these deeds. No better example of this is in the scarring he imposes upon himself, mentioned between pages 302 and 304. Within these few short pages, we discover the severity of the fallen, discovering how he has betrayed the once just virtues he used to justify his actions. To elaborate, his father's money, gained by slaving away at a construction site in order to provide the family, is being squandered by Weil's wine addiction, wherein he regularly uses the money to selfishly provide only for himself rather than the family. In response, instead of trying to fix it and regulate himself, he instead decides to mark himself with scars to quantify the money he owes to his father. Yet, even this is a worthless act, as he continues to greedily use the money, with the markings being nothing but an afterthought and reminder, all culminating in his own realization that the markings only ever mocked him for his weakness in both his resolve and determination, not actually fixing the problem at hand. In contrast, Autumn, despite using her body as a means of fitting in through depravity and lust, as referenced on page 240, ignored the cruelty the world tried to force upon her. While she originally found herself ugly because of her albino origins, white hair, she continues through her life with a smile, disregarding the harshness of the world around her. She kept with her roots and embraced the lessons of her father's ideals, endorsing generous wit and kindness over adversity, a gift Sidney hoped Weil would have, yet he solely lacks, resulting in, Autumn becoming a humorous, undefeated champion of all their lives. Or so it goes on page 394. Yet, unlike Weil, through her determination and embracement of her roots, she began to stride above the world, abandoning the world that long ago abandoned her, giving hope and a smile to society that hadn't even thought of the idea. These two contrasts, these siblings, show the effects of one's roots, demonstrating how even though they share similar origins, through different perspectives and how they brought these pasts into the present, they create different futures for each other. For a while, by turning away his future's ideals and embracing cruelty, he became nothing more than a shell of his former self, driven only by hate, grief, and anger. Autumn, on the other hand, became the opposite of her youth, transforming herself into a household name through the novel she published. Yet, with respect to these two examples, I'm not saying you must follow your roots to a T, as using Matthew as an example, it can lead to a similar fate. Matthew, if I need to explain more, is the main antagonist of the book, and is cruel and brutal to those around him, as well as to himself, manipulating and misleading those for his own benefits. He creates lie after lie after lie to justify his actions and reasoning, actively changing his own perception of truth just to fit the image he wants to portray. In his eyes, truth is not what people want, but the image of truth is what they desire. Yet, despite his constant cruelty towards Sidney throughout the book, as he had a hand in almost every misdeed ranging from the stolen money to the framing of Sidney for killing Matthew's brother, Matthew does have a sort of hero-in-the-rough trait, if I may say. Notable, once you begin looking at his roots. In his youth, Matthew protected his sister from their father's beatings, sacrificing himself so she wouldn't have to bear it. While this can be somewhat attributed to Cynthia, the sister, manipulating him, something which is common throughout the book, the muscle and the brain relationship stereotype, it does show that he may have some good qualities once upon a time. Yet, as the years passed and he embraced more and more of his roots, he ended up becoming the very thing he protected his family from, shown in his abusive relationship with his brother Trenton, the one that died. He states it himself that due to all the beatings, he has turned into the very same man his father was, as quoted on page 346. This all leads me to a singular conclusion and reasoning for how ones should interpret their past. To me, you must use the past that your future self would want as their past. It is easy for one to become corrupted by both obedient following or the rebellion against one's roots. Therefore, one must be knowledgeable about what one's desired future should look like, and not dwell wholeheartedly on the past, as it will only consume and blind you to what you must do in the present. Life, whether it be fiction or reality, will not shy away from throwing bounty or boon to either your past, present, or future, as it sends thousands upon thousands of souls to abusive and unhealthy roots in which they will grow up in, leading to the creation of many Matthews and Lyles within our society. Therefore, we must overcome our fear of the future, our regret of the past, and the uncertainty of the present in order to not just discover the modes of these fictional characters, but how we want to see ourselves 20 years from now, staring at the novel that was our life. This is Sobro Talks, and that's all I've made so far today. And nonetheless, I wish you have a pleasant day and a good read.
Hey girl, don't lie to me. Tell me, where did you sleep last night? In the pines, where the sun never shines. I shiver